So we have to get a selfie at the end of this because Cal was like, "I need a selfie, please."
Oh,
So,
okay,
yeah.
all right.
You already have a fan club of people.
Well, that's heartening to know, I suppose. Yeah, that's good.
Howdy, y'all. My name is Dylan Wu with the Austin Beacon. I'm seated here today with Dr. Patrick Gray, who is the Dean of Arts and Letters here at the University of Austin. Dean Gray, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
So the first thing I want to ask is I want to get a sense of like what was the decision-making process like to come to a brand new university like UATX?
That's a great question. So at the time that I was offered this job, I was on fellowship in Budapest. My wife and I had had our first child, who's now 2 years old, but at the time was a few months old. We had a household in the north of England, and my wife also had connections to Cambridge, where she was and still is doing a doctoral degree in the history of architecture. So it was very complicated, right? But well worth it, because it's a unique opportunity and really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We moved here, we came here, and blam, suddenly I had gone from working at a old established medieval university, Durham University up in the north of England, right, with the cobblestone streets and the winding river through town and the cathedral. And suddenly I'm in the Dunder Mifflin temporary office. You know, we didn't have this whole like nice place like we do now where it's all designed so beautifully. I did have some days where I thought, what have I done? This is crazy.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of gave up a post at a very prestigious university to come here and start a university with, at the time, no students, no faculty, just about a dozen people in an office sketching out ideas and institutions and rules and regulations on paper. And it becomes very real, I suppose, first when we got the building and we're walking around here downtown and we're like, right, this is our campus. But the game changer, the turning point for it all is when students like you show up. I think especially the students that we're attracting here are very high agency. In psychology, they talk about external versus internal locus of control.
Right.
If you have an external locus of control, life comes at me and I just respond as best I can.
Right.
Whereas other people have a more internal locus of control where they say, I make things happen. I go out and exert my will on the universe, and to the extent that I can, I change things, I try to improve the world, I reorient things. And that's the kind of student we're looking for.
Well, I'm immensely excited as well. So I'm curious, what is it about like the modern university environment that you see that's going on that made you kind of decide, I want to come build a new one. I want to come establish a different one?
I think many people out in the world at large are only just now starting to fully register how much damage has been done to the humanities by trends like identity politics and postmodernism, and to realize that reforming these disciplines from within is going to be very difficult.
Right.
I had gone to England very deliberately, leaving behind the United States, because England tends to be more moderate, or at least that's what I thought at the time. At least at the time, England seemed more moderate. And so I thought, well, if I move to England, then I won't have to deal with this whole culture war hysteria. And what I realized was that the culture war has become inescapable. You know, even outside America, in the north of England, I was still having to deal with the ramifications and practical effects of wokeness. And I thought it will be much easier to start over from anew than to try to reform the situation from within.
Something that I've thought in the past is kind of watching Thomas Sowell, Milton Friedman, these discussions that they have, you know, oftentimes many decades ago. They speak on the same issues that I see like it's happening in America right now, far more eloquently with much more data than I could or I seemingly could.
Fair enough.
So why can we now make a difference as compared to these intellectual giants from back then?
You know, the fight is evergreen in a way. 20, 30 years from now, it's going to be you and all the other students that we have here. And that generation, your generation, is going to be responsible for leading the country. And so there is a question of passing down knowledge and passing down perspectives that can inform the next generation of leadership. I think one of the real differences between what we're doing here at the University of Austin and what I have encountered at other universities is a conscious effort to look back to the past for information about the present and information about what might come to be in the future, right? In many departments, especially in the humanities, there is a tendency to have utopian thinking that wants to say the past is dangerous for people to study. If you study the past, you might encounter bad ideas, and you might start to think that human nature is limited by certain constants.
Right.
There is a tendency to ease older material out of the curriculum. That way you can make sure that the students are only ever encountering material that conforms to a particular progressive political agenda.
Right.
We very consciously want people to understand the deep history of human civilization and human society, and to understand the more immediate history of the American experiment. What are the things that America did right, and what are the changes or variables that might jeopardize that experiment? And that depends on students like you reading people like Thomas Sowell, as well as many other people, and having some access to and awareness of the great minds of the past.
And so you are a Shakespeare scholar, right? And
Yeah.
I'm curious, are there any kind of lessons that you've learned from studying Shakespeare that you think would apply to us as students at UATX?
Yes, certainly. You know, in American action movies, you often have this like one figure out on the horizon, like the Lone Ranger, or like Kevin Costner in Waterworld. He's like that one lone guy who gets everything right and saves the day. It's a very American archetype. And I think there's some wisdom to it, but also some danger. And Shakespeare is very keenly aware of that danger. So in Shakespeare's plays, that one person who's out there defying the consensus, refusing to listen to advice, is a person who's in danger. And so Shakespeare, I think, helps especially young people to keep in mind the need to listen to advice and pay attention to the past and ask other people around you what they think of an idea, in addition to having that kind of hard-charging forward momentum, you know.
Would you say that Shakespeare explores human nature in a way?
Yes, and that is a surprisingly controversial thing to say.
Why?
One of the major claims of postmodernism is that there is no stable or constant human nature over time. That what we think of as human nature is, in fact, a symptom of a particular set of economic and social and historical consequences. Yeah, one outcome of that way of thinking is that the humanities lose confidence because they lose the idea that there is a subject to be studied, the human.
Right.
Yeah? Why read the Iliad if there's nothing in common between Achilles and Agamemnon and present-day people?
Or the type of person that was back then is not the same type of person that is today.
Yes, exactly. And so we want students to understand that human nature has some constancy to it. Yes, there's huge variation, right? There's huge variation in terms of personality, temperament, intelligence, emotional life, interests. That's part of what makes life worth living, is you encounter all these different perspectives. And yet at the same time, underneath all that, there are recognizable human traits. So we can see ourselves reflected in that character, and we can learn from that character and behind the character from the author what it's like to be human. You know, we can experiment with reality at a distance through these hypothetical situations.
So in your Budapest lecture on academic freedom and the rule of law, you make the point to say a university is speech. It's an expression of your speech, right? If I come to UATX, there's an indication of the kinds of beliefs that I might hold, right? Of pursuit of truth, freedom of inquiry, and that's in a sense that's actually okay. That's acceptable, and in fact, that's not even just acceptable. It's necessary for universities to have that. So the problem becomes when a society has these universities, but they no longer have the kind of pluralism that all the universities have the same speech. They have the same ideology. They're the same. Then your choice, you no longer have a choice. Would you say that that's kind of the problem that's happening in universities right now?
Yes. I would frame it a little differently, maybe. I think a lot of universities don't want to get involved in the question of deep purpose. Partly because it is a very vexed and controversial question in our time. In fact, I would say one of the distinctive characteristics of modernity is the loss of a sense of purpose. Right? If you go back to the 16th and 17th century, one of the big changes in intellectual history is the loss of what philosophers would call the final cause, or the telos, or the sense that everything in the world, including human beings, but also, this coffee mug, also those trees over there, they all have some sort of purpose that they're serving. I think human beings are put together to believe that things have purposes and to want to have a purpose. Right. And they want to have a purpose that is objective. Humans desperately crave this kind of purpose.
That's outside of them.
That's outside themselves, that they haven't just totally fictionally created.
Right.
And institutions need this in order to be healthy. And so if you have an institution where there's a vacuum of purpose, where the institution is reluctant to articulate a purpose, something will come in and establish itself as the purpose. Right? And I think the cure for it is for universities to become more comfortable articulating their purpose and using that purpose as a way to define themselves and to discern what parts of what they're doing are mission critical and what parts are in opposition with their mission. And I do think that will mean that we'll get universities that are seminaries. We'll get universities that are like training camps for political partisans. We'll get all sorts of different universities moving towards different ends. And that's actually good, I think. What we have now is a situation where universities are very reluctant to assert a clear sense of purpose. And so it gets filled by an unacknowledged, half-disavowed quasi-religion of social justice. Right? That's why I think it's important when we talk about the University of Austin to say our goal is not simply open inquiry, but it is the pursuit of the truth that open inquiry enables. And ultimately, it is the human flourishing that a grasp on the truth enables. The more we know about the truth of human nature, the truth of physical objects that we can manipulate and change, those truths enable us to live better lives.
So last question here.
Yeah.
We're in the beautiful UATX library.
Yeah.
We are about a month away from starting classes, which I'm very excited for. Is there anything that you are looking forward to seeing faculty and students accomplish together this first year?
You have to imagine, on a lot of college campuses, people are scared. They're scared to speak their mind. Who could be listening to me? What if somebody hears this? Everybody's constantly hiding their opinions. They're thinking before they speak, ooh, do I really dare to say this? Even if you have a good intention to try to keep up with all of the sort of political correctness. So in my role as dean, I've seen two groups. I see students coming here and finding a change from that. They're like, oh, I can say what I actually think. And oh, this person disagrees with me. And oh, we're actually talking with each other about it respectfully. Man, I definitely can't do that at my high school. you know, and people are relieved. It's like a weight off their shoulders. Like, okay, I can actually explore my ideas, and I can encounter some ideas that are different from my own. Separately, I see that with the faculty, right? We had to hire so many faculty that we developed an unusual system where we would bring in 6 prospective faculty at a time, and they would present to each other as well as us. It was a way of figuring out also their skill at teaching. Can you explain to an educated non-specialist what it is you do in a way that is intelligible?
Right.
It can be difficult, right? And the faculty would hit it off. They're like, oh, yeah, this is someone I can have a debate with. And you have to realize, it's not like we're all sitting around agreeing, right? These things can get lively. There is a variety of opinions here, but there is a agreement to be respectful and to have that good faith approach where you ask people what their rationale is and hear them out about it rather than just assuming, oh, you must believe this because blah, 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 right? But what I get to see now with the start of the school year is the students meet the faculty. It's a real delight to come here as a member of the faculty where the students are plugged in and they're saying, what can I learn from this? And how does it relate to my life? How can I use this to better myself and become wiser and be more successful at my future plans to do X, Y, Z, Q, A, and to see those students having a conversation with each other. I'm looking forward to seeing the faculty and the students get to know each other and to have that experience together in the classroom and the friendships, the mentorship, the shared life that will emerge from that experience.